So now that we've looked at how Maya decides on how things collide, and we kind of have a basic overview of the nucleus and how it's going to calculate those collisions, now we're going to look at how we can make that cloth into different types of cloth and the actual settings for the nCloth itself. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the collision thickness just so you see the cloth. So I'm going to go into collisions, turn the solver display off. Then I go back into the nCloth and we're going to look at the next tab, which is the dynamic properties. This is how you decide what type of cloth you're actually dealing with. Do you want it to be a light chiffon? Do you want it to be a heavy burlap? Things like that. So this is where the settings are at to decide how that cloth is going to be. So if we look at the settings here, remember if you keep in mind that it's dealing with springs, it'll make everything a little easier. You have stretch resistance. How stretchy do you want the cloth to be? Compression resistance. How much do you want it to compress after it's stretched? Bend resistance. How much do you want it to be able to bend? Bend angle drop off. How sharp do you want it to be able to bend? Shear resistance. Rigidity. How rigid do you want the cloth to be? Do you want it to resist deforming at all? Input mesh attract we'll come back to once we actually make some nCloth objects. And then you have down here some of the physics type things. Mass. How heavy do you want it to be? Lift. How much lift do you want it to have if it's dealing with wind or collisions or things like that? Drag. How much do you want it to be able to drag over an object? Tangential drag. How sharp do you want it to be able to drag? Do you want it to dampen it any? Do you want to dampen the stretch at all? So these are the settings that are going to decide what kind of cloth it is. Now, the cool thing about this is there are presets. Ha ha ha! You are allowed to cheat. Yay! Now, these presets are really good. They actually work with the type of things quite well. Now, let's see here. No, I'll do it later. The cool thing about this is they're really, really informative as well. So this is really cool. Let's do like burlap, and I'm going to replace it to make this into burlap. Now the cool thing about this is, do you ever notice this notes area down here in the attribute editor that's usually blank? No one ever uses it. Well, when they set up nCloth, they actually took advantage of this notes area, and it is awesome. Ha ha ha! So if you look at this, it says burlap is rough, non-stretchy, moderately heavy, and very dampened. One may yet need to increase the stretch resistance further for high gravity or fast moving objects. If the material seems too springy, try increasing the damp value. That's a hell of a note, isn't it? It tells you what settings they used and what settings you may need to tweak to make it fit for what you want it to do. So just by clicking on a preset, I've already learned that increasing the stretch resistance may need to be used for high gravity or fast moving objects. So that gives you a cool note about stretch resistance. If the material seems too springy, try the damp value. So now you know the damp value deals with springiness if you want it to be less springy. That's a hell of a note, isn't it? And they all have them. Let's look at like chiffon. This simulates a relatively rough, very lightweight, and stiff chiffon. It responds strongly to wind and has very dampened motion. One may yet need to increase the stretch resistance further for high gravity or fast moving objects. If the material seems too springy, try increasing the damp value. Again, that's a hell of a note, isn't it? So now if I hit play with my chiffon, and actually let me stop this. I need some more time on my timeline. There we go. Just so we have a little bit more time to let it settle a little bit more. And we got our simulation going. Da, 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 da. And let me stop it right there. So with the chiffon, you'll see that it's stiffer. Stiff chiffon. So you see that those folds aren't quite as dramatic as they were when I did the last simulation when it was just on the basic settings. So this is where you can actually start to deal with what kind of cloth you want to make. Then you can go through, and they got some cool ones in here. They got honey, they got heavy denim, concrete, rubber sheet, thick leather, t-shirt. Ooh, t-shirt's a new one. Let's see what that one is. Medium weight and friction, relatively dampened motion. You see how much more this folds in than the chiffon? Stop. There we go. So you can see the difference between the chiffon that was a little stiffer and the t-shirt, which is a lot less stiff and folds up a lot more. So that's how you deal with what kind of cloth you want to make, is dealing with these settings inside the dynamic properties. Cool, cool.